All right. Have you ever felt torn between the hustle and home? I know most of us have at some point or another felt that. Andrew, you have really created amazing strides in conquering that balance between the hustle and home. What can you share with us about that?
I think this is one of those areas that a lot of people are most likely struggling with. Maybe you're trying to figure out the balance between, how do I become someone who can truly strive in my career or my business or everything else that I'm doing, but in addition, also make sure that I have enough time for family, friends, and the things that actually matter in my life. And so overall, this balance is something that is not as difficult as most people think. Most people think you can't build wealth and in addition, be someone who can kind of do what you want in life. But this is what you're going to see time after time with a lot of things that we talk about is we believe that you can do both. And so when you look at this, one of my favorite ways to kind of make sure that you are the most productive during your day is to kind of come out and do things like time blocking, for example. So one of the main things that I love to do is I will spend a lot of time just setting up my week. So like on Sunday nights, for example, I will do what I call these Sunday night rituals. So I will go through my entire week, look at my biggest priorities, and I'll put them into my calendar during that time frame. And this allows me to tackle the most important things within my week so that then everything else kind of floods in. And then I have those time blocks of time where I can spend with family or friends or whatever else I want to do. So for me specifically, the balance begins there. And then you can start to expand out into making more money, earning more, and where to put those dollars.
And you've lived this, in your career, as a financial analyst, real estate investor in all things, but also CEO and founder of your company, you have lived it. So you have been growing your family and you've been balancing between the two, creating massive wealth, generational wealth for your family and finding it. So you've lived it as well as shared it.
Absolutely. And this is one of those things that I did not want to be able to sacrifice one or the other. And so for me specifically, I had to figure out a way to make this work because as my family started to grow, I have 3 kids. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So we're in the thick of it right now. We're having a lot of fun. And these are the times where get a lot of laughs, but it's also a lot of hard things are going on at the same time. They take a lot of your time. And so when you're thinking through this process, you want to say, okay, I want to make sure my businesses are growing. I want to optimize this, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I can spend time with my family because the number one thing that I would look back and regret on is I missed out on those early years. I missed out on that time with my family. And so I wanted to make sure that we did that. And so I started to think through the process of how do I do this? How do I make sure I do this? And so when you go through that time blocking process, then you realize, okay, well, there are some of these things that I don't want to be doing anymore. I don't want to spend so much time in the admin tasks or those types of things. And so when you track stuff like this and you understand where you're spending your time, then you can start to either delegate that out or you can work on a plan to find a way to hire out some of the areas that you really don't have enough time for anymore. Then you can focus building the business instead of having to focus so much of your time in the weeds and having to worry about all that stuff. And so that was the starting point for me. That was a light bulb moment for me. And there's a great book on this called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell that he walks through, the process of thinking through how to buy back your time so that you can target and pinpoint those things that really are a waste of time and you should be spending more time on the things that are the most valuable.
Well, I think you nailed it. And that is a great book on this topic. And not only buying back the time, it really ripples out because you're also impacting other people's lives by the people that you choose to allow to do something. And frankly, a lot of times they will do it better, faster, more efficiently, and more effectively than we would. So there's like a fringe benefit when you buy back your time that you're actually also impacting others. So your whole company, Master Money, I believe that you work with people to not only realize what they could do in terms of buying back their time, but being able to do it with confidence and not feel as if they're doing something wrong. I mean, I run into people that they feel like if they let go of that money and invest in leverage, they feel like they're doing something wrong. Do you run into that?
100%. Where we see people come across, that are just worried about they don't have the right plan in place, or maybe they're not doing the right things with their money, or they felt as though they were doing the right things, but in reality, they kind of realized down the line that maybe they are way further behind than they originally thought. And my entire goal is to empower people. I want to give people hope, and I want people to understand, this is my light bulb moment where I can actually build a massive amount of wealth. I just need to know some of the steps that I need to take. And so for us, one of our favorite things to do is to simplify every area of finance so that you know what the next step is that you should be taking based on your own situation. And so a lot of our podcast and everything else that we talk about is simplifying these concepts so you know the action steps. And once you start to take action, what you're going to realize is just like compound interest with investing, those actions are going to compound over time and you will see a change in your finances and you will begin to start building wealth. And what the reality for a lot of people is at the beginning, it feels like it's a slog, it's a grind, and it's difficult, and they really don't know what they're doing. But then all of a sudden, a year goes by or 2 years go by, and all of a sudden they start to see and reap the benefits of those results. And it is really, really cool to see those light bulb moments. In fact, my goal is to create 1 million millionaires. That's kind of what we set out to do, which is really fun.
That.
And so it's one of those things that I love helping people with this stuff because really the most of it is psychology. So like 80% of it is really your psychology and only 20% is your know-how. And once you start to master that psychology side, then you can really make a huge difference on your money.
You know, you brought up the light bulb moment and the reality, if you look at Gen X, my generation, a lot of us are not necessarily where we thought we would be at this point. And I know that there are people that are feeling as if it's too late for them. What would you say to anyone who feels like this guy sounds great and it sounds like I could learn something from his podcast, but it's too late for me? What would you say?
This is some of my favorite folks to talk to because, and we have a number of them that we love to chat with. This is one of the biggest myths when it comes to finance. You can absolutely make a massive difference. Now, let me just give you one example. So we had a listener who started to listen to the podcast. And she was 47 when she started this process. And she said to herself, hey, I actually want to retire in 10 years. So I want to retire by the time I'm age 57. I absolutely hate my job. I do not want to be doing this anymore. And moving forward, I want to figure out a way to achieve financial independence. I think most people listening to this podcast at some point in time want to be able to have enough money where they have financial freedom, where you can walk away from the office or the cubicle or the job site or whatever else you're doing right now. And so she said to herself, I'm going to find a way. So she found the podcast, which was really cool, and started to implement some of the strategies that we put into place. And once she started to do some of the things that we talk about at the time, she saw a massive difference and was able to retire in 5 years just by doing this. And so what are some of the things that she did? Well, first, she started to think through, maybe I need to protect my wealth first. So the number one thing we want most people to do is to be able to protect their wealth because life can derail you. Your water heater can break, your business can have a problem, you can have an issue come up, and all of a sudden you need to have a plan in place to protect you against that. So what do? You have something like an emergency fund on hand. So we call it the 1-3-6 method, where you save 1 month of expenses, then you pay off high interest debt, then you save up 3 months of expenses, and then eventually you save up 6 months of expenses. It's going to allow you to protect you against life. Now, why do I say 6 months of expenses? Well, the reason for that is job loss. It is 2026. There's a lot of changes in the job market right now. If you ever lost your job, you want to have enough time on hand to be able to find another job that was also be a job that you actually enjoy or something you want to do. You don't want to just rush to find the first job that's available to you. And so you can start by protecting your wealth in that way. And once you get to that 3 months of expenses, one of the things we want you to do is as you're starting to build towards that 6 months is then you get the ball rolling on investing. So a lot of folks out there who are starting late, maybe you have children, maybe you don't, but if you do have children or maybe you have aging parents who are depending on you or folks in your life who you feel as though you're just getting stretched really thin and you're like, how do I even find enough money to invest? Well, one of the things you want to do is make sure you follow what we call the oxygen mask method. So when a plane is going down, what do they usually tell you to do? They say, put on your oxygen mask first, then you can help out other people. And so the same thing goes with your money. You want to take care of your own retirement first, then you can help out other people. There are no loans for retirement. And if you have kids and you're helping them with college, or you're helping them with, their mortgage or their rent or whatever else, all of a sudden they're going to have to take care of you in retirement if you don't have enough money saved up. And so you want to make sure that you are prioritizing your retirement before some of these other expenses. Now, I know that sounds harsh and I know it's difficult, especially when you are looking at relationships, but this is what has to happen. And it is going to be much better off for everyone involved in the situation once you do that. And so some of the things that you can do is start investing in things like retirement accounts. So the order of operations that we look at is things like an HSA, for example. If you have a high deductible health plan, an HSA is a wonderful place to get started where you can look at this health savings account and have the ability to have triple tax advantages. The Roth IRA, the Okay, all of these are great accounts to get started with where you get those tax advantages. Then if you decide, hey, I want to retire early. I want to retire early and I want to make sure I can still access some of my funds. Just getting a regular taxable brokerage account is another great option for folks out there who are looking to retire early because you can access it. There's a lot of flexibility and there's actually way more tax benefits than what most people realize. And so these are just some of the starting points and ways that I want people to think about this. But it starts with your mindset. It starts with your psychology and understanding it is not too late. Sure, you may have made some mistakes in the past. You may have felt as though time has slipped away. But guess what? It is never too late. And I want every single person to know who feels behind that you can do this. And if you get started today, all of a sudden, what you're going to realize is taking that first step is going to begin to compound. And this snowball will grow, and you will be in a much, much better situation if you start today.
You made me think about, with that particular example, that we overestimate what we could do in 1 year and we underestimate what we could do in 5. And so the example of your client where she actually wanted to create so much change, you mentioned she accomplished it in 5, and you probably really blew her mind that she was able to cover that much and build that much in a shorter time frame than she thought possible.
And it really just, exactly right, because it really just comes down to your mindset and what you truly believe can happen. And a lot of times this sounds like woo-woo or rah-rah. And if you're saying to yourself, well, I don't really have enough extra income on hand. Well, what she did was she focused her time and energy on actually increasing her income. And so one of the things she did right away was she started to negotiate her salary. She started to find ways to earn an extra income. She started a side job that turned into a business. Now she had an additional income. Then she started to invest in rental properties, and now more money was coming in. And so she did everything in her power to try to increase her income. And this is why your income is the number one lever that you can pull that will absolutely change your financial situation. And once you understand that your income will change your situation, it is everything. See, a lot of people, they grew up, and maybe you had parents who grew up in the Great Depression, or maybe you had parents who just lived in a time frame where things were really restricted. Things were tight, and it was very difficult. So a lot of times the way you were brought up is how you handle money. It is how you deal with money, where it is going to be a big, big shift. And once you recognize that, then you can start to focus on some of the things that you need to do going forward.
Well, so she ended up expanding her income and her assets through real estate, which you already know, I love real estate. So how is that possible for people to consider? Like, let's say they've got their primary residence, but they already feel tapped out and they're like, oh, how would I start investing in real estate? We know there's so many dreamers and people that want to do it, and they just don't know how to start. Do you have any words of wisdom for them on how to start setting the path where they could do that?
This is one of my favorite group of people, because how I started investing in real estate is I had no money at the beginning. So when I first started, I was in my early 20s, and I started to look into real estate. And I got really into it. I would listen to all the podcasts. I would read all these different books. And I was so interested in real estate. And I was like, I got to do this. And so a lot of my money was either tied up in the market or in a 401k or something like that. So I said to myself, well, I don't want to pull out of those accounts. I want to figure out how to do this and allow compounding to continue on. So what I did was I found a cash partner. So you can start with $0, and here's how you do it. You can go find a cash partner, and you become the sweat equity partner. And so what I would do is I would go find the properties, I would find the tenants, and I would fix up the properties. I would find the contractors. I would manage pretty much everything, and I was the sweat equity partner. So the first deal we did, I only owned 20% of the property, but I was doing all the work. They brought the cash to the table, right, and I owned 20%, and they owned 80%. And obviously, that's a great deal for them because they wanted to be able to, invest in real estate, and so they started that process there. But then as we got to know each other, then the second property was 25 to 30%, and the third one was 35 to 40%. And we started to build this relationship where they had trust in me. And we got to a point in time where we were 50-50 partners after we started to acquire more properties and more housing. And so for folks out there who have no money, they may say to themselves, well, I don't know where I can get started. If you can find someone where you could be the sweat equity partner and they can bring the cash to the table, that's a great option. Another great option out there is things like wholesaling. Now, obviously, you have to know how to run the numbers. You have to know kind of what you're doing. But this is where you are a person who is the middle person between a buyer and a seller. And so when you're looking at this, you can go find sellers out there who are looking to sell their house. You become the person in between where, let's say, for example, the house for easy math is $200,000. And you say, okay, I'll find you a buyer for that $200,000 house. You find the buyer says, I'll buy that house for $220,000. You make the difference. You make the $20,000 difference based on that. That's another way to get into real estate or to make some money as someone who doesn't have much money at all. And so there's creative ways to come up with investing in real estate. And real estate is honestly a creative endeavor. There's a lot of creative and cool things that you can do with it. And it's just coming up with those ideas and getting started. That is the big key. For me, I had analysis paralysis. I waited for 2 or 3 years before I actually got started. And instead, I think the key is to get started because you will learn so much more from Real Estate University, which is in real life, than from books.
Yes. Absolutely agree. Yeah, and it's almost like jumping off the high dive. You know, at some point you have to jump in and know that you're going to be okay. There are people along the way that will do their best to help protect you from some of the pitfalls. So that just
Absolutely.
it's remarkable. I would say too, find agents that work with investors.
Yes.
And every agent I know would be happy to give you at least one meeting, one coffee meeting where you could ask them anything and they can and ask the real questions, ask the real concerns that you have or the fears that you have, because they'll help you, you
Exactly. And
know?
that's one of those areas where if you can find people who are in the industry, that's really powerful. And even like real estate meetups, I met so many different people from local real estate meetups. I'm in the Tampa area.
Right.
So for me specifically, there's some great ones out here. And there
Mm-hmm.
was one specifically I can remember that I used to go to one. It's in St. Petersburg, Florida, if anybody's in that area. And it's this group of investors that meets in the back of a Denny's. And they meet there on Wednesday or Thursday mornings. I can't remember which day it is now, but
Right.
they would meet there every single week. And you'd walk in there, it just looks like a group of regular guys and gals that are kind of meeting together. And then all of a sudden they start to talk about their properties that they have. And one guy
Yeah.
comes up and he starts to have a conversation about how many units he had. And he had over 2,000 units. This guy looked like he was completely homeless. He had holes in his shirt.
Yeah.
He had this long, scraggly beard. He had flip
Right.
flops on. He had, it just did not look like he was wealthy at all. And he was very wealthy just from kind of having these conversations. All of a sudden you get back in that room and there's people back there. Like if you've ever read John Shaw from Building Wealth One House at a Time, like he has
Yes.
friends in there. He's in that area. And there's just so many
Right.
cool things that happen in these real estate meetups. But the amazing thing is there's a lot of folks in there that are willing to do JV partnerships or joint venture
That's
partnerships, just
right.
like we're talking about
That's
here,
right.
where you can find money on hand. And you may say to yourself, well, I don't know where these meetups are. You can look online. And if your local area doesn't have a meetup, this is the best opportunity because you can host the meetup. And if you are the
That's
host
right.
of these things, all of a sudden every person in that room knows who you are and the opportunities will open up. The same thing goes for something like this, like a podcast where you meet
Right.
all these really cool people. If you're the host of the event, you meet all these really cool people and you can have conversations with them and pick their brain. And it is really, really neat what happens when you actually open up or the person who orchestrates the event.
Well, one of the things I love about, well, investing in general and personal finance, which your podcast is the personal finance podcast, is that with real estate, it is open to everyone. And maybe you can't do it today, but someone will teach you what you need to do so you can do it. And you could probably do it much sooner than you believe. So I love your recommendations. Get into action and get into communication. So don't I sound bossy, but don't just sit in your house just reading the book or just watching this video. Start communicating, join that group, get out. The communication and the relationships, that is where you're going to turn over the opportunity. So just get into action and it's going to be amazing what could come for you.
And the coolest part about these things is even when you're starting off, people want to help you. And they want to help
Yeah.
you in a way that, especially the real estate community, they want to help you in a way that is so powerful. Sure, there's some bad apples out there. For the most part, when you go to these meetups, they're all there to meet other people as well. They want to help you through the
Right.
process. You can bounce questions off them. And some of these folks, like I said, the guy with 2,000 units, they are masters at real estate. And you can literally
Yes.
have someone that you could chat with on a weekly basis to help you through problems or questions that you may have. And it's one of the best free opportunities that are out there.
So a lot of people, jumping back just to personal finance in general, I did notice when you were talking about the 136, you said you set aside the first thing, set aside 1 month's worth of your current living expenses, correct?
Correct.
And then start to knock down some of the high interest rate debt. Then get to 3 months set aside. So what, if not to belabor it, what I'm hearing you say is work on multiple fronts at the same time. You are assembling reserves, then you're paying down some debt, assembling more reserves, paying down more debt, assembling more reserves, and then investing. I feel like a lot of people, they feel as if they have to do one whole thing first. So like, okay, well, after I pay off all of my high interest debt and my old tax bill, then I'll start setting aside reserves. And then once I have the reserves, then I'll start. Have you noticed a lot of people want to compartmentalize rather than working on the multiple fronts almost simultaneously? You did set benchmarks, right? But is that an issue that you think prevents a lot of people from achieving their personal finance goals?
I do, because what happens to a lot of people is if you do this in the wrong order, for example, like For example, I know people who will start by trying to pay off high interest debt. And so when they start in that order, all of a sudden what happens is they're trying to pay off this high interest debt. Maybe they're kind of living close to paycheck, or they're just kind of in this situation that's pretty difficult. And all of a sudden they start to pay this off, and then their car breaks down. And when their car breaks down, they don't have enough cash on hand, which causes them to go deeper into debt and derail the entire process of what they just did. And so we started with breaking this up into chunks instead so people can actually make progress on their goals. So the 1 month is there based on making sure that you do not get your progress derailed. And the powerful thing about having 1 month of cash on hand is it reduces your stress and anxiety and allows you to make better financial decisions moving forward. Because you at least have that 1 month of cash on hand. And the amount that you need is going to be very different for each person, which is why we do it as a percentage of income instead of saying something like $1,000 or saving $2,000 or $3,000. For each person, it's going to be very different. Some people I know spend way too much. Some people I know, it's not way too much. It's great for them, but they spend, $20,000, $30,000 a month. And then some people out there, spend $5,000 a month. And so the difference is going to be very, very different for each person. Then once they get that high interest debt going and getting that paid off, and we classify that as anything above a 6% interest rate outside of your mortgage, things like that. But it's mainly, credit card debt, personal loans, those types of things that are really derailing your financial progress. That's what we want you to focus on. And getting those paid off is one of the most freeing things, because guess what? Now you have more cash flow, and you can take that extra cash flow, fill up the rest of your, emergency fund and reserves, and then get your dollars invested. We want you to split off once you get to 3 months, splitting off investments and cash reserves so that you don't delay investing. I want you to invest as early as you possibly can. And it's hard to even delay it this long, but it is necessary in order to protect your wealth from being derailed at any point in time. And as we all know, when it rains, it pours. Every single time happens, it seems like 10 of them happen in the same month.
Right. Yes. So having that, being prepared. But I love hearing that you can start building your wealth while you're addressing your current structure. I'll call it structure. So the debt, or the way that you use your credit cards, or you can start building your wealth and taking action and investing while you're also reducing that higher interest rate debt.
Exactly. And that's the big key. I think for most people out there, if you delay too long and you have too much debt on hand, then all of a sudden you've waited, 10 years. What that 10 years is going to cost you $500,000 or more, depending on what happens. We just did a study recently of a 25-year-old and a 35-year-old. If somebody at 25 started investing, they could start investing $500 per month. And the 35-year-old start, at the same time at $500 per month, and they would lose out on $500,000 just from doing that. So it's a massive, massive difference there. And so all my folks out there who are kind of trying to think through and tackle this, I want you to get invested as early as you possibly can, even if it's just small amounts of money over that time.
I think it's phenomenal. When you were talking about the client, jumping back to her, where she wanted to retire and she hated her job, you and I both know there's probably people listening to you and I right now that also hate their job. Any other recommendations, or any other insight you could share with someone who feels stuck, feels like, I hate my job, but this job is what funds our current life, and they're scared to step away? Any thoughts in that area?
So you have way more options than you think you have. And I think for most people out there are some concepts that I want to introduce you to. So she did it with real estate, and she did it with investing in the market a little bit as well. But real estate was the primary component that got her freedom quicker to be able to kind of do the next thing. And now she invests a lot more into the market long term, and she kind of does the hybrid method. I'm the same way. I do the hybrid method where I invest in real estate, I invest in the market, and I invest in businesses. Now, businesses are an interesting one. This is one of the best opportunities that are out there, I believe, because a lot of folks from like the baby boomer generation, for example, are retiring. And when they retire, they have to figure out what to do with their business. And most baby boomers don't even know that they could sell their business. But this opportunity is a tidal wave that is currently happening right now, where we are seeing businesses go up for sale. So an example of this would be, let's say a plumber has been a plumber for the last, 50 years. They're ready to retire. They don't have a retirement plan in place. So they list their business for sale. Well, you can go and buy that business, and they already have customers. They already have all the systems in place. They already have all these things available. And you can buy that business with something like an SBA loan, for example, which means you only have to put 10% down and you can finance the other 90%. And so there's a lot of really cool things. It doesn't have to be a big business. It could be a small business. But there's a lot of really cool things just like that you can start doing. So business is another example. But another one that a lot of people don't think about is what we call Barista FIRE. Now, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. So it's right along the lines with what we're talking about here. And it's called Barista FIRE because originally what people would do is they would go work at Starbucks part-time to supplement their income. So they'd save a certain amount up, and then they go to work at Starbucks at part-time to supplement their income for the rest of it, because they would rather do that than work at a job they hate. So here's an example of how this would work. Let's say somebody ends up investing some of their dollars, and over the course of the next couple of years, they have $500,000 saved up and invested. Well, that $500,000, if we use something like the 4% rule or the 5% rule, means that you could draw down anywhere from $20 to $30,000 just on that portfolio alone. And so if you have that in place, that's a really cool way to kind of get started. And you're like, hey, that's really neat. I can have this portfolio, I can draw down on this, and it'll preserve over the course of the next 30 to 45 years. And then we think about, well, what if you needed $50,000 per year to live? And this is just easy math. The numbers can be shifted around as we start to think about this. But what if you needed $50,000 per year to live? Well, what if you took a part-time job as a yoga instructor because you love yoga? Or what if you took a part-time job as a fishing captain because you love to fish? Or what if you took a part-time job doing something you actually like and spending your days enjoying your time? This is what the Barista FIRE concept is. It's actually working for a certain period of time, having this nest egg set up where you are aggressively saving on this nest egg. But then in addition, at some point in time, you can actually take your foot off the gas and go do something you like doing. And a lot of those jobs now are paying more than they used to, where you can, find something where if you're interested in Pilates, for example, my wife goes to Pilates, a couple times a week, and those instructors there now are making really good money because they have the ability to be able to, get clients in, they can do some really cool stuff, and they're enjoying life. And that's what I absolutely love, is some of those part-time jobs that can help you enjoy life. Then as you start to build up wealth, or as you start to work some of those jobs, you can figure out other opportunities that become passive income that allow you then fully retire or coast into retirement. But also you have things like Social Security coming down the line and other things like that will help you with that process. And so some of these concepts, I think a lot of people don't really think through. They feel as though they're trapped and there's nothing else they can do, but there is more optionality than you actually think. You have more free will than you know.
And, going back to the very first thing we started with of the home and the hustle, if someone is in a job that they hate and they hear that idea that you just gave, they might be feeling like, but I have no energy left. Plus, then what would happen to my time with family and for myself? What's your insight on that?
I think for the most part, the goal is to buy back your time. Again, so it's to find a way to use your dollars as a tool to buy your time back. That's the ultimate way that you can buy your money. So what I would say to them is, hey, in your day job right now, what I would do is spend a lot of my time figuring out how much I need and starting to allocate dollars towards those investments. So if you need $50,000 per year, you figure out what those investments need to be, and then try to get as close as possible to the point in time where you can take some of those extra dollars and put them there. Now, the best way to do this is to increase your income, and you could start at your day job, for example, where negotiating your salary is one of the easiest wins that you can get, where if you know what you're doing, and you know how to do this process, you can really make a lot more money. Let me give you an example of this. So we have this system where we talk through like 6 months of time where you negotiate your salary. What a lot of people do is they walk into their boss's office and they say, hey, I want a raise and I need it now. I've been doing this, this, and this. Without having any communication prior to that, their boss is caught off guard or they just don't know this is coming. And so they can't just give them a raise on a whim, usually when they do that. So instead, what we tell them to do is 6 months before your yearly review, go into your boss's office, schedule a meeting with them, and say, what are some of the things that I can do to make this department more productive, or things that I can do to increase the potential of this department because I want to earn more money or I want to get a promotion. And these are the reasons why I'm doing this. They give you a list of items that you can go back and do. You take that list of items and you start executing and you start making sure that you are doing this. Then you meet with your boss in the next month. And you say, hey, here's some of the things I'm doing. Am I on track for this? They say yes. Now we're in communication mode. Then you do it again the next. Then you start to communicate back and forth. And all of a sudden what happens is if you're really tired and you feel as though you want to spend more time with family, you're increasing your income at the place that you spend time most, where you don't really have to increase your hours much more and you get that promotion or you get that raise. If you do this, even getting 3% more per year just by learning the skill of negotiation, over the course of 30 years, you will have made over $3 million more in your career than somebody who doesn't do this. And this is why it is so important to learn these skills, because it'll change your life. So that's the number one thing I would say is starting at your day job and allowing it to be something where you can increase your income. And if you can't increase your income at your current job right now, your boss says, hey, we just don't have the room or we don't have the budget. That's a classic, thing that a lot of people will say. Well, the average person who job hops or switches companies that they're working at makes 14% more on average. And usually what we have seen as of late is actually a little bit higher than that. So being loyal doesn't pay anymore. And for generations, being loyal is the thing that helps you get paid more. Now it doesn't anymore. And so looking at places where there are room for growth is going to be one of the next best thing that you can do. So if you're tired and you're sitting there and saying, I need to figure this out, making more money is going to be the easiest way. Cutting back, you can only cut back so much. But if you can
That's right.
increase,
Yeah.
that's going to be the key.
Yeah. Because when you attempt to achieve more through cutting, at some point you stop cutting fat and you cut into the muscle. And when you cut into the muscle, then you're hobbling yourself, so I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I want to reiterate, because that is an amazing statistic. So currently job hoppers that will move with purpose and intentionality, they're making, I believe you said 14% more.
Yep.
And in some instances, and I'm assuming some industries, even more than that currently.
Exactly. And that
so
is
be open to
major
change.
thing. Exactly. Be open to change and be open to look for new opportunities. The best time to look for an opportunity is not when you need it. It's when you already have a job. It's when you have that available, because in today's day and age, it takes a little longer to find a job than it used to, especially a job that you like and it has the culture fit and the career fit for you. And so now is the time to start to network with people, go to events in your industry, go to those different things that really are going to help you meet more people, because you need people to help you go up to bat. And that's going to be the big key when it comes to your career.
So Andrew, jumping subjects for a minute, how critical is where you live to your overall wealth building?
I love this question. When it comes to where you live, it does make a huge impact. And in terms of, there are states that have really, really high tax rates that are going to make a big, big difference. So if you think of states like New York or California, there are states like Washington, there are states like even areas of like Chicago, for example, have really high cost of living, but in addition, they also have high tax rates. And when we look at some of this stuff, your income can be cut in half just from living in a specific location. But when you have that high cost of living, you have to just run a couple of numbers to figure out what you want. People in California will say to me, well, I live in California, they tax me at 50%, but I am willing to pay that amount for these scenic views or what I'm, the water, or I love to surf or whatever else the reasons are. And so what I do believe is that you shouldn't just move for money. If your family roots are there, the things that you're doing in life are there. Some people will say, well, I'm going to move to Puerto Rico because there's 0% tax. Well, in reality, what are you going to do there? How are you going to spend your days? How are you going to think about some of this stuff? But it does make a huge impact. And if you feel as though you don't have a ton of roots in a specific location and you want to move to a place that is much better off for your finances specifically, that is something you can absolutely do. And in our example of someone who maybe they just absolutely hate their job, their boss is a big jerk, they really, really don't want to be doing that anymore. Sometimes you can ask yourself, well, if I'm in New York City right now, what if I moved to a different state like North Carolina or Florida or even Alabama, or like you go somewhere else where the tax rates are significantly lower? Would you be happier doing that, moving to a place where the cost of living is much, much lower, taking on a job that is way less stressful, especially if you don't have those roots? So I think for a lot of people, this should be evaluated a little bit more. And but just don't make the decision based on money alone. Make that decision based on lifestyle plus money is the kind of the secondary or third thing.
Right. It is something that I think so we talked earlier about like Gen X, but I think a lot of Gen Zers are facing that right now, where their income is not commensurate with the cost of living of where they grew up or where they have lived. So they're kind of there by default, attempting to make it work. And it's really cutting into being able to create a financial structure. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you know way more about this than I do.
It truly is. And I have friends who, for example, they decided they wanted to go to New York City because it's the big city and it's exciting and it's enjoyable and it's something they really wanted to do. And they were chasing opportunity. But then all of a sudden, as time went on, they realized pretty quickly that the cost of living is so high. The rent is, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. One of them was every single month. And they ended up having to have this situation where they felt as though they're making $200,000 per year and living paycheck to paycheck. And they're like, I can't do this anymore. And they end up moving. And it's one of those areas where if you feel constricted like that, just know you don't have to stay there. You don't have to be doing that. And it's one of those things where if it causes stress and anxiety or just worry around your finances, it's not always worth it. And just know you have options. And this is what I keep kind of alluding to, is like you have more flexibility than you think you do. I know the decision is hard and it feels like you're stuck there because you're in it. But if you zoomed out and somebody else looked at your life and was giving you advice, what would they say? They'd most likely say, I'd probably just get out of here if you don't have any roots or family members or kids that are in school or things like that. And I would probably go somewhere else and live somewhere else. Ask the company you're working at if you can work remotely. I just had a friend who did that recently. They were in a high cost living area. They asked the company, hey, I'm going to move to Florida. Can I just work remotely for you? The company said yes, and they were able to make it work. So a lot more options than you think there are.
Especially post-COVID, because a lot of companies were scared of hybrid or remote or, telecommuting, whatever. And now they're less scared and they have some evidence where they can make decisions and make an
Exactly.
offer.
And I think most people are just worried about the ask, and they're worried like, what will the
Yeah.
company think if I ask this? But it's their job to say no. It's not your job to assume they're
Right.
going to say no. So it's just worth asking them and doing it in a obviously
Right.
professional way, but in a way that makes sense for your career.
Right. Because I think of fear too, especially if someone likes their job and their company, is they're scared that if they, just by asking the question, they'll be penalized. Like they'll have less opportunity or people will feel like they're not all in, so they're scared to ask. But I agree with what you just mentioned of practice it. Think about how do you present it in a very diplomatic way that shows you're open and serious and yet that you're not being threatening and that you're still all in. But don't be afraid.
Exactly. I think that's the big key. And too many people feel as though they're stuck when in reality they have more flexibility.
Right. Yeah. I want to go old school. So jumping to the back of the racks, there's an old school method of if you just train yourself from a young age that you put 10% of every check that crosses your palm or every dollar, you put 10% away and save it. Is that still a viable system that people can use if they just want to start somewhere and they feel overwhelmed? Is that something that is beneficial or sustainable?
Absolutely. Your savings rate actually has a huge impact on how soon you can retire. Now, that sounds obvious, but what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you decide, I want to retire over the course of the next 30 years. Well, if you want to retire over the course of the next 30 years, you have to figure out what savings rate you need in order to be able to do that. And the cool thing about increasing your savings rate or having that 10% or maybe it's 15 or 20 is that the more that you increase it, the less time you have to work because it's working in two different ways. One, it's lowering the amount that you spend every single month. But two, it's also increasing the amount that you're saving and investing so compound interest can work in your favor. So here's a great example of this. There is a chart that we have, and it's if you go to mastermoney.co/resources, we have that chart there. It's called the savings rate chart, I believe. And on that chart, what it has is a list of different savings rates. And it'll tell you, okay, well, if you save 10% of your income, you're going to end up having to work for at least 45 years. If you save 20% of your income, this drops all the way down to 28 and a half years. If you save 25% of your income, and it goes kind of down the list, which is kind of cool. And one of the things that people, when they start to realize the simple math behind this early retirement is one of the ways that I like to look at it. And one of the things that people start to realize is, oh my goodness, if I save 40% of my income, I could retire in less than 2 decades. Well, if I do that, how would I do that? And they start to try to think through and calculate, okay, well, if I increase my income here, maybe I cut out a couple of things here, or maybe I just pay off my car so I don't have a card payment here. And all of a sudden I have this opportunity to be able to be financially independent way faster than I ever thought I could. And I love these kind of light bulb moments because most people will kind of think through this and say, okay, I can actually do this, or there's some ways that I can tweak my financial plan to make this work. And so my minimum for a lot of our listeners is the 20% savings rate, where we want you to save at least 20% of your income towards investments and or while you're building your emergency fund, it can also go towards your emergency fund, because that gives you that 28 and a half year timeline. At a minimum, you're working less than 30 years if that's your goal. And then if you want to increase it as your income increases slowly, that's one of my favorite things to do. And in fact, for those of you out there who are like, I can only save 5% or 6% or 7%, here's my favorite exercise. Go and look at how much you're saving right now. And if let's say it's 5%, and say to yourself, okay, well, this month I'm going to save 6%. So I'm either going to cut back somewhere, I'm going to try to make a little extra income. Maybe I'll sell some things in my garage and be able to have some extra income. And all of a sudden what you're doing is you're increasing that dial by 1%. It's not that painful. In fact, once you start to realize this, it's not going to be a huge deal. And then all of a sudden next month, maybe you increase it another 1%. And then maybe in month 3, you don't have enough extra right there. You had a couple of things that hit that really, aren't allowing you to increase your savings rate. But then maybe in month 4, it's another percentage point. And all of a sudden, over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, you're saving 20% by just slowly boiling that frog, slowly increasing the dial. And it's not as painful as it would be if you were just trying to rip off the Band-Aid and try to save as fast as you possibly can. Where some people, they go too quickly with their money, and all of a sudden
Right.
they quit because it's difficult, it's
That's
painful,
right.
it doesn't feel good. And so instead, if you can slowly increase that dial and make it manageable and just stay disciplined with it shouldn't be too difficult. Then you'll be able to get to the point in time where it makes sense. And if you get stuck, if you're like, I cannot save another dollar, that's an indication that you want to increase your income there. That's the
Okay.
stopping point where you're saying to yourself, okay, well, now I have an income problem instead of a savings problem, and I want to increase my income at that point in time. That's why we like the 20% rule now, is because our goal is to try to get you to work less than 30 years if you want to. Now, if you're someone out there who loves your job and you're like, I'm going to work the rest of my life, then fine, you can have a lower savings rate if you want to. But if you want to work less than 30 years, I like starting at 20%.
You know what I would add to what you just shared is that there's a difference in working 30 years because you have to and working 30 years because you want to. And that, I think, is a key difference. Meaning, if you follow what you're recommending and you have that 20% savings rate and you take the other actions, then at year 20, let's just say, you can leave the job you hate and you can do something you love, right? It's because you're not
Absolutely.
reliant on, I have to make X to pay for Y. It gets you out of that trap.
Exactly. And you can actually mathematically figure out, when you can leave that job. And you can mathematically
Right.
figure out some of these things that it's not hard math. It's just kind of a quick way to kind of look at this and say, my goodness, this is way easier than I thought it would be. And if I just am a little bit intentional with some of these choices, it'll change my freedom forever. And again, ultimately, we all want our time back. We want the ability to, even if you're working your job, you want the ability to say, I don't need this job. I can walk away at any point in time because I saved enough and I invested enough for it to be in this point in time. Or I put enough into rental properties where we cash flowed enough to be able to walk away when we want to. And now you're working because it's optional, because you want to spend your
Right.
time doing it instead of
Right.
having to wake up every single day and listen
Yes,
to a boss that you hate.
that's right. So it's critical. I am curious your thoughts. This is a controversy or a point that will be debated. So there's what do they call it again? The coffee leak. So there's
Yes.
some people in financial advice area and they say, stop buying the coffee out and, stop doing these little things. And they say, if you stop that leak of the small things, it's going to have a big impact. And then the other side typically says that will not be enough. That is barely that's not going to be a significant enough change that you're going to feel it and you're going to build wealth. Where do you fall in the whole, the coffee expense category?
I love this because I typically lean towards the side against like worrying about the coffee, meaning I don't want you to really worry about those small purchases if you don't have to. But the way to do this, or the way to think about this and frame this, is that you want to focus on the big expenses that matter most first. And so what most people do is they focus on the coffee or the small expenses first, which causes
Right.
them to focus on the wrong choices. Let me give an example of this, because the first time I started to budget or get my finances together, and then right after I started to kind of figure all this stuff out, then I got married. And I went to my wife and I said, I started, creating a budget, which she did not love at the beginning, surprise.
Hmm.
And so all of a sudden we had this budget in place, and I started to come flying out the door and saying, hey, we're overspending on this, this, and this. And it was all these little tiny purchases. What I failed to realize at that time frame was that the reason why we were in this situation where we were living paycheck to paycheck and trying to figure out our money was not because of these little purchases, it was the big ticket items. And so some of the big ticket items, for examples, for most people, housing is going to be the biggest one for most
Right.
people. We want you to spend 30% or less of your income on housing expenses. And for those of you out there that don't know how much you spend, just calculate what your total cost of ownership is. So it's going to be things like not just your mortgage, like repairs, things like all those other maintenance items, all those different things all combined into your housing expenses. Transportation is another big one. Car payments are the biggest wealth killers in this country right now. Most people are probably overspending on their cars. You'd be amazed at how many people I talk to and their car payment is between 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 now. It's just
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. And the prices of cars have gone up. That's a huge wealth killer. Your car, the thing that's sitting in your driveway, is most likely causing way more financial stress than your $7 latte. The third thing would be food. And it's not just your
Oh,
grocery
yeah.
bill, although groceries are the biggest surprise for people when they start to add it up. They can't believe how much they're actually spending on a monthly basis. But it's more so the Uber Eats, the eating out, those types
That's
of
right.
things can
Yeah.
really add up as well. It's a huge impact on your dollars and what is going to happen there. And so those are three big ones. But also outside of that equation is going to be things like your asset allocation. What are you invested in? Because if you have the wrong asset allocation, for example, you could have a portfolio of 90% bonds and 10% stocks, and you are, 35 years old? Well, if that's the case, all of a sudden you are really losing out on the opportunity cost of a ton of money. And so things like that are huge. The interest rate on your mortgage, all those different things have way more impact than those $7 lattes. Now, if you've
Right.
mastered all of those, like all of those things are done and you've mastered all of them and you still are trying to find ways to save an extra $200 a month and you go to coffee shops every day, sure, then you can kind of look at that and cut that out if you want to. But I want you to focus more on the things that you love and spend more on the things that you love. And if coffee is what you love, more power to you, and spend less on
Right.
what you hate. If you master those big things, then you don't have to worry as much about the coffees.
I think that's really great advice. And it is when you put it, I thought of if you focus on the coffees first, you're putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Like it's still
Yes.
doing something, but it's not quite right. And it's not potentially not going to give you that benefit you truly desire.
And it really will, like if you have a long time horizon, it'll help. It really will. I mean, David Bach's latte factor, that's something that is true. But
Yes.
if you miss out and you focus on that, but you don't focus on the big stuff, and you're going on, $20,000 vacations and you're going into debt because of them, and like all these things are happening, and you just are racking up a credit card, but you're cutting out the coffees, that's going to be a huge
Right.
deal long term. So that's where
That's
I think a
right.
lot of
Yeah.
people go backwards.
Yeah. And if you make that the badge of honor, like I've never spent more than $4 on a cup of coffee, but you're doing all the other things you just mentioned, just make sure that you're thinking that all the way through.
Exactly. It's the big
Yeah.
things first, and then you can trickle down to the small stuff. And I call them $1 million money decisions, the big things, because when you factor in the opportunity cost or what the return would be if you invested those dollars, all of those are over $1 million in your lifetime. So just tweaking those and making sure those are correct, you can have millions of dollars more in your portfolio just by changing some of those big items, which is crazy.
Well, I want to go back to you for a minute. So you're CEO and founder, and the podcast host on your podcast, right? So you've got your
Yep.
company, you have your podcast, and you're a speaker, right? And you have this family. So what's next for you? How do you keep yourself driving and making all of this happen? What can you share about how satisfying this has been for you?
This has been one of the most rewarding journeys that I've ever had. And one of the cool things that we have gotten to do with some of the things that we've been doing lately is just changing people's lives and their finances for the better. So like, for example, we just had a person reach out to us, and it was a news network, and they came out to us and said, hey, there was this guy who we just interviewed who was completely homeless. They did not have a home. They were living out of their car. They found your podcast, implementing some of the stuff that you were teaching them on the podcast. They went from being homeless. Now they own a home. They're married. They have a family and kids. And it was the most rewarding thing. Like we get messages like this all the time, which is just one of the coolest things that we've ever seen overall. So for us, continuing on this journey to help as many people as possible with their finances is one of the biggest things that and most rewarding things for me. I think I was kind of born to do this. And it was one of those aha moments when I got to start doing this that just changed my life forever. I was the 16-year-old in high school who was actually reading personal finance blogs in computer class instead of kind of doing what we're supposed to do in computer class. So it's just like I nerd out about this stuff all the time. And it's just one of those areas that I absolutely love. So for me specifically, kind of going forward, I think a lot of it is doing more of what I love and less of what I don't enjoy. I've owned some businesses that I recently sold that I did not enjoy doing whatsoever. And it's kind of one of those epiphanies that I've had where like, why am I not just focusing all my time and attention on the thing that I absolutely love, which is helping people with this stuff and being able to spend more time with my family. So we've even partnered, like as of recent, with NerdWallet. So NerdWallet and
Okay, great.
NerdWallet Wealth Partners. We're launching another show for high earners, which is kind of cool. And so that's called Your Next Dollar too. So that just launched this week. So we're doing a lot of cool stuff like that where I'm staying in my lane now, where I want to stay and do some of this really, really enjoyable stuff.
I do think you were born to do this. Like and it just, the mission of creating 1 million millionaires. How serious are you about that? How do you track it? Is it something that impacts you think about it every day? Like, tell us more about that.
It is one of the biggest impacts for me overall. It's because I think what's happening here is we have a lot of listeners that are, when they found us, they were younger, and we're seeing like all of a sudden we get these milestones that come up. So we have like this community that is like off the actual podcast and offline. So I can actually talk to people and chat with people. And in that community, people will kind of share their wins. And so people will start to share things like, just hit my first 100K. We just had somebody say that this week. just hit like my first big milestones. And so we love tracking those in there. And then when people send me messages, I'm tracking kind of where they are on their journey. And we even try to follow up with them if we can. So now the cool thing is with like AI and stuff like that, I've used Claude and stuff to help me kind of track some of the folks that I know have reached that millionaire milestone. And they try, I tell people to email me once they hit it because I want to see the progress over this time frame. So right now we're kind of trying to figure out all the different ways to track it. We're putting it all together in one. And so my goal is to kind of see how fast can we get there? How can we reach these folks who have, maybe they just started, for the very beginning. Maybe they found us, halfway in their journey or a quarter, 3/4 of the way in their journey. And it's been a really, really cool process on there. So my biggest thing is I want to be able to track it. That's 100% one of the big things I want to do. And so we've created this process to begin doing that, which I think is going to be super, super fun. But that's what gets me going. That's what gets me up every day because I know that anybody can do this if they just know the right things to do next.
Well, it's really inspiring. If anyone is listening and they want to become one of those millionaires, they can reach out and start following the podcast, right?
Yes.
Personal Finance Podcast.
Personal Finance Podcast, yep.
And what other resources would they have at their disposal?
So if you want, we have tons of free resources. If you go to mastermoney.co/resources, we have things like retirement calculators or compound interest calculators, or we have just guides like on the 1-3-6 method I just talked about for your emergency fund. We have so many free resources and we want to give as many away as we possibly can. So check that page out, mastermoney.co/resources. That'll give you, as much as you can handle there, which is really cool. Then we have a newsletter. So every single week we send out a newsletter called the Master Money Newsletter. It's 5 minutes a week of money tips that you can use. And we actually do a money challenge every week for an actionable tip for you to be able to go out and do. I just wrote it this morning. This week's is to increase your 401k by 1%, kind of what we talked about in this podcast episode. And so we give you challenges like that to make you kind of progress through your process. And so that's a really cool place as well. And then we're on all the social media. So at Master Money Co, we give quick tips that are usually around a minute about your finances and your money. And so we're on everywhere from TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you can find us, we'll be there.
So Andrew, it has been a pleasure having you here. And what comes through loud and clear is no matter how old you are, no matter what job you currently have, no matter what debt you're starting out with or what obstacle you perceive, it's possible. And you can start from wherever you are.
Absolutely. And that's our entire goal, is to teach people that that's the possibility that you have in place. And thank you so much for having me here. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I truly appreciate it.
Andrew Giancola, founder and CEO of Master Money and the host of Personal Finance Podcast, with more podcasts to come and more shows to come. Reach out. You're building that community. And if you want to be one of the millionaires impacted by Andrew and all of his work, make sure you connect. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
And if you're listening to this episode, I hope you'll come back for the next. Let us know your goals and your personal finance in the comments wherever you're consuming this podcast.